I'm 83 years old. My hands shake more than they used to, and most mornings I wake up already tired. Not the kind of tired sleep fixes, the kind that comes from having lived long enough to see how certain choices echo all the way to the end. There's something I need to say while I still can. For most of my life, I believed love was something you stepped into once everything else was settled, once you were stable, once you were finished becoming whoever you were supposed to be. I thought love would understand that. I thought it would wait. These days, I sit by the window a lot. It faces the street, though not much happens on it anymore. A dog walker in the morning, a delivery truck now and then. Sometimes children pass by on their way home from school, laughing loudly, unaware of how quickly that sound disappears from your life. The house I live in is clean, quiet, orderly. Too orderly. There are no arguments in it, no clutter from another person's habits, no shoes by the door that aren't mine. People used to say that kind of peace was something to aim for. I've learned it's also where loneliness hides best. When I was young, I wasn't reckless or careless. I didn't chase excitement or chaos. I was the dependable one, the person who showed up early and left late, the one people trusted with responsibility. I wore that like a badge. I grew up watching uncertainty tear my family apart, bills stacked on the counter, my mother counting coins at the table, my father working himself quiet. Love existed in that house, but it was strained, always competing with survival. So I made a promise early on. I would never build a life that fragile. I told myself I would wait until I was solid before inviting anyone else in. In my mid-20s, I met a woman who didn't rush me. She had a calm way of speaking, like she believed most things could be solved if you just stayed long enough to listen. We met through coworkers, nothing dramatic, just a conversation that lasted longer than expected, then another, then dinners that weren't officially dates, but felt heavier than friendship. She asked questions I wasn't used to being asked. Not what I did for work, not what my plans were, but how I felt in my own life. I didn't have good answers. I talked instead about where I was headed, promotions, goals, timelines, all the things that made me sound responsible and empty at the same time. One evening, she asked me gently where she fit into all of that. I remember staring at my plate before answering. I told her I cared for her, but I wasn't ready for anything serious yet, that I needed time, that once I had things figured out, I'd be able to give more. She nodded. She always nodded. She didn't push. She didn't argue. She didn't demand. And that made it easier for me to delay. We kept seeing each other, but something changed. Not suddenly, just a slight distance, like a chair pulled a few inches back from the table. I worked longer hours. Told myself it was temporary. There was always a reason, a project, a deadline, a chance I couldn't afford to miss. When she asked to plan things more than a week ahead, I hesitated. Let's see how things look then, I'd say. I didn't realize how often then never arrives. Eventually, she stopped asking. That should have frightened me. It didn't. I thought silence meant understanding. One afternoon, she told me she'd met someone else. She said it calmly. No anger, no blame, just honesty. She said she couldn't keep waiting to be chosen. I told her I understood, and I did in theory. What I didn't understand was that I had just closed a door that would never reopen. After that, life continued. That's what makes these things so dangerous. nothing breaks, nothing collapses. You wake up the next morning and go to work. You convince yourself that if something truly important were lost, you'd feel it immediately. You don't. It comes later. My career grew. People relied on me. I liked being useful, liked being needed in ways that didn't ask too much emotionally. Relationships came and went, kind people, good people, but I kept them at arm's length. I was polite, present enough, never fully there. I always believed I'd know when it was time to commit. Time never announced itself. Years slipped by quietly. 30 turned into 40, 40 into 50. I bought a house because it seemed like the proper thing to do. It echoed when I walked through it at night. I told myself that meant freedom. Friends built families, their lives filled with noise and complication. Mine stayed clean and efficient. They'd say things like, "You're lucky. You answered to no one." I smiled when they said it. Inside, I felt like a guest in my own life. There's a kind of loneliness that doesn't hurt sharply. It just settles into you. You don't notice it day to day. Only when you realize you've gone weeks without anyone asking how you truly are. Not how work is going, how you are. I kept believing love would make sense later, that it would slide naturally into the space I was preparing for it. Then one day, much later, I heard she had died. It wasn't dramatic news, no urgent call in the night, just a message passed through someone who remembered we once knew each other. Cancer, short illness. I sat in my car for a long time after hearing that. What hurt wasn't that we hadn't ended up together. What hurt was knowing I never found out who we might have been. That version of my life vanished without ever existing. At the memorial, people spoke about her warmth, her patience, her ability to make others feel safe. I remembered how she used to wait while I talked about the future, hoping she'd be part of it. I had mistaken patience for permanence. After retirement, the structure holding everything up disappeared. No schedule, no demands, no one expecting anything from me. That's when the truth grew loud. Without work to distract me, I began noticing the spaces where people should have been. Empty holidays, silent evenings, a phone that rarely rang. I wasn't miserable, that's important to say. I was just alone. And alone feels different when you realize it's permanent. At 83, there are things you simply cannot redo. You can't return to the moment someone was still waiting. You can't call back the version of yourself who still had time to choose differently. That's the part people don't talk about. Regret doesn't always come from failure. Sometimes it comes from delay. From believing you're being careful when you're really just afraid. I wasn't afraid of love itself. I was afraid of starting before I felt complete. But you never feel complete. You become whole by letting someone see you unfinished. That's what I didn't understand. Now, my days are slow. I tend the small things. I eat simply. I rest often. People are kind. Neighbors check in. That matters. But kindness isn't the same as belonging. Belonging requires history, shared time, ordinary moments stacked quietly on top of one another. You can't build that at the end. Sometimes I think about how many conversations I postponed, how many invitations I answered with another time. I believed I was protecting the future. I was emptying it. If you're listening to this, I don't want to frighten you or tell you what to do. I only want to tell you what it feels like to reach the far end of life and realize how much depended on moments you thought were small. Love doesn't wait in storage until you're ready. It lives in the present, or it moves on. I learned that too late. Now, when evening comes and the light fades across the floor, I sit quietly and let the day end the way it wants to. I'm not angry anymore, just honest. There isn't much time left for me, and I'm at peace with that. But I wish I had understood sooner that readiness is often just another name for postponement. If this stayed with you, that's enough. I've said what I needed to say. I thought love would wait. It didn't. And that truth follows me gently now, all the way toward the end.